Hello, everybody. Welcome to the last video lecture for the class. Today I'm just gonna do kind of a pretty quick summary of the class and then talk about the final exam. I just want to note, I truly understand that this has been, especially the second half, a bit of an unusual semester, a bit tough. And so, I appreciate everybody sticking with it, and doing the best they can under difficult circumstances. And hopefully we can all get back to, a more normal semester, next year when things, improve. Okay, so let me go ahead and share a screen one last time and, talk about, what we've done in this class. Okay, so conclusion to the class. This is just to first off go over, what we've gone through in this class, the topics that we've talked about. So first off, we, kind of talked about simply what is sociology, right? So talked about, major concepts like the idea of social construction, the idea of institutions and institutionalization, talked about research methods, right? Talked about what society is, kind of really an idea of what it is, what is sociology, right? And how is sociology different from other perspectives of people in the world. Next, we talked about, the structures of society, these large forces, these large systems that influence and impact our lives. Things like culture, things like norms and deviance, these kind of massive or big structures that influence us, right? Social networks, right? And, one of the main points of these things is that even though they are sometimes invisible, even though they are hidden from our view, they have an immense influence on our lives, right? And the structures which we live in are very important. Even though it's humans who created them, right? These structures then come back and have a huge effect and influence over humans' lives. Next, we talked about the individual in society. And so here, we moved from looking at big social structures to looking at individual experience. So here, it's not so much about large systems, but about your life, your experience in those large systems. So what it is like to have an interaction, what is it like to be socialized by society, what it's like to have an identity, right? And how society affects and shapes those very personal experiences. And I think one of the best examples of this was the sociology of emotions, where we feel like, or we think that emotions are private and personal, but we then realize that they are influenced by these social structures, by norms, feeling rules. Next, we talk about inequality, right? And different forms of inequality that inequality can take. Inequalities of class, of gender, and race, right? And we can think of inequality as part of the structure of society, right? Inequality, the division of how resources get divided up is part of how our society is structured, right? But it's also about personal experience, right? It's not just about large structures. It's also about, what a person experiences in their everyday life. They experience inequality, right? So we see that inequality is both part of the structure of society, but a part of individual experience. Then lastly, we've been talking about society in motion, right? Basically social change, understanding that society is not just something permanent, but it's something that changes over time and will continue to change. So this is essentially what we have done over the last 14 or so weeks. And so I want to just go back to a concept that I brought up in one of the first parts of first day of the class, right? This idea that humans and society is a superorganism, right? That this is a way to understand people, a distinctive way, right? And so rather than understanding humans as just 7 billion individual persons, individual bodies, or individual minds, we can understand humans as one large collective, right? So if you remember, a superorganism is something like bees, right? To understand bees, you don't understand bees individually as an individual bee, right? That doesn't really make much sense, right? But to understand bees, you have to understand the beehive, right? The collective of bees, right? That all the bees together in a hive, where there's like tens of thousands of bees in a beehive, all together they make one biological organism, right? They make one system that functions together. A bee on its own can't really live or exist, right? Bees only live, they only exist, they only thrive within a hive. Same is true for ants, right? Ants only, the only way to really understand ants is to understand them as part of a colony, right? An ant colony, and that all these ants are dependent on one another. They all need each other to continue to exist. They all have to function as one organism. And so the way to think about it is it's an organism spread across many distinct bodies, right? So just like one body can have many cells or many parts to it, many organs, and different systems, so is true with a superorganism. A superorganism is one organism that is spread across many different bodies. The last example of superorganism, humans, right? And so the idea here is just like bees and just like ants, the way to understand humans is to understand us as a superorganism. This organism that actually has been alive for thousands and thousands of years and will continue to exist long after we're all dead, right? An organism that is spread across many different bodies, right? Individual human bodies. And so the idea here is just like bees and just like ants, we're all dependent on one another. We all need each other, right? Whether we like it or not, we need our fellow animals, our fellow humans to live and thrive and exist, right? A human baby on its own is not going to last more than a few hours. So what this also then means is we can understand ourselves, right? One of the goals of sociology, of the social sciences, is for humans to understand humans, right? It's an attempt of our species, an attempt of our, biological entity, our superorganism, to understand who we are, right? In some sense, it's a mode of self-reflection. It's humans trying to understand humans, right? And so the idea is social science is a way to do that. It's a way, in some sense, to step outside of ourselves to see ourselves, right? And so the way to think about it is, we're like bees trying to understand the beehive, right? Just like a bee might, wonder, what's going on here? What's up with all these bees around me? Why are we all in a beehive, right? Humans are trying themselves to understand human society. And as I mentioned, part of the issue is human society can sometimes be hidden. It can sometimes be invisible. And so we're trying to understand this invisible thing, right? Imagine you were a bee, right? Surrounded by all these other bees, right? It might be hard to see the beehive. It might be hard to understand what's going on with all the buzzing and noise around you. In a similar sense, it's hard or difficult for humans to understand this human social superorganism that they're a part of, right? And so, but this is what we try to do, right? We're trying to understand ourselves, right? We're trying to see ourselves and understand, why we do the crazy things that we do. Why do we do this? Why do we bother? Or what's the purpose of it? What's the use of it? Right? So I would say the use of it is that by better understanding ourselves, we can get a better control of our society, right? Often it feels, I think, sometimes that social events or society is something that's just uncontrollable, this alien force. Things happen and we don't know why it happens, right? There's a terrorist attack, there's a war, there's climate change, there's a pandemic, right? And we're like, why, why is this happening? How, how can we have a better control over these things so that we can, limit the negative things that happen, right? And our argument is, well, one of the first steps to have more control, to have more of an influence over ourselves, is to understand ourselves, right? And so sociology isn't just for fun, or something that's just useless. It actually has an essential and imperative use, right? That it allows us to understand who we are as humans, and what is our social situation. And by doing that, we can get a better understanding of how to control the world around us. And so that's my argument for the use or purpose of sociology. Okay, let me now switch gears and talk about the final exam. So here's the layout. It should seem pretty familiar because it's basically very similar to the layout of the midterm exam, right? So 21 multiple choice questions that are going to be about half the percentage grade of the final exam. Four short answer questions. You will answer in a paragraph or so, and then 3 identifications, right? So you've got probably a choice out of 4 or 5 when you pick 3. Again, a short answer where I'll give you a term and then you define that term and try to give an example if you can. Right? So it's going to be online, obviously, right? So you're going to have, there's going to be a time limit of 2 hours. I think that should be, more than enough time to complete the exam. If you have extra time, then you will have extra time to do the exam, right? So it's going to be, here's the time frame of it. I'm going to have it out Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. And then essentially you'll have 3 days, a 3-day window in which to complete that exam, right? So you can do it Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. If you really have some problem with that, email me and we can figure it out. But for right now, that's the window of the exam. It'll be open Tuesday morning, and then you'll have the Thursday evening to complete it. Mostly on the lecture, right? And it's going to be on the lecture content after the midterm. All right. So the final exam is not comprehensive, but it is after the midterm, right? And so it's going to be mostly on the lecture content, right? Mostly on, for the second half, mostly on what you've seen in the video lectures and stuff. There might be a couple of questions on the readings if they have been discussed in the video lectures, right? So if I talked about them, then, you had it as a reading, you had it as part of the video lecture. And so that's a fair game. So I might ask 1 or 2 questions about the readings, but mostly on the lecture content, mostly following on, from what's in the PowerPoint slides. So I'm going to have a study guide up by tomorrow, similar to the midterm study guide, basically listing out the topics for the exam. And then I'm going to have a Zoom review session on Monday at 10 a.m. And it's going to be this class and another class that's, getting the same exam. So there could be a number of people on it. And so essentially that Zoom review session is simply a chance for people to ask me questions. And so I'll basically open it up and people can, ask me questions for the study guide, ask me to clarify something if they don't understand it. Okay, that is essentially it for the class. Again, I wish I was doing this in person. I much prefer in-person classes and to see everybody face-to-face and to see everybody off face-to-face. But, I hope that everybody has a okay end of the semester, that your exams go well. And I look forward to seeing you all again in future classes. Okay, bye.